Another edition here of Getting There with Gods, where we talk about the career journeys of athletes, coaches, business owners, media members from upstate New York. It's a little reunion here. My guy, Mike Lindsley, joins us here. Mike, a younger version of you, 6, 7, 8 years old. For those who may not be familiar with you, take us back. Where'd you grow up? What'd you want to be as a kid? Same dream job when you were 18?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to reconnect. I was hoping this would be audio only, so I didn't have to look at you the whole time. But um, from the beginning, I mean, if I were to give you the contact information of my first grade teacher, or my kindergarten teacher, or my second or third grade teacher, or my eighth grade teacher, or my 10th grade teacher in any walk of subject, they would tell you, yeah, I'm not surprised he's doing this right now. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, me growing up in central New York, when you're a little kid and you are a sports fan and you grow up with the Syracuse Orangemen, and yes, at that time they were the Orangemen, and I still wish they were. You grow up with the culture of the basketball and the football teams and lacrosse, and every single kid who's young who loves sports, they get engrossed in that immediately. And every single day you're asking your dad, hey, can we go to the game? Can we go to the game? So I grew up with 30,000 plus in the Carrier Dome with the blue curtain and the football field where they actually kept the football field the way it is. Georgetown, Villanova, St. John's, UConn, all these schools coming into the dome. And then the football side of it, they were actually really good I know some people can't understand that, but they were really, really good. I mean, when I was 8 years old, guys, they went undefeated, for God's sakes. I was a Don McPherson guy. And now fast forward to 2022 and I'm 42 and I have McPherson's number. I have him on my shows all the time. I connected with Floyd Little for a while, and I have such a deep appreciation for football history. So it began with that, obviously. And then I started falling in love with the Yankees. My dad's a big Yankee fan. His mother was a huge Yankee fan, and his dad as well. I never met my grandfathers, but, I'm named after my dad's dad, Michael Gordon Lindsley. So, I just started getting into all of it. And then I started falling in love with the Bills. Jim Kelly was there, and it all just kind of rolled into one. I used to call, a local radio shows when I was a little kid and get on and probably say stupid stuff, but and then I got actually to be pen pals with Dick McPherson, the legendary Syracuse head coach. And then fast forward years later, and I used to see him every game in the press box. I told him on a show that I would blow out a candle and make a wish for him for victory, and I mailed him the candle. And he kept sending me team photos and autograph cards and all that sort of stuff. So, I was a geek, and I was a junkie with this stuff right from the beginning. Probably passed my 10th grade Regents exam in English because I wrote about Mickey Mantle. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I had no idea what I was going to do. The teacher was a complete bitch, and I had no idea. I really had no idea how I was going to pass this thing. And I remember walking in a few days later with a couple of buddies, and she looked at one kid and said, you passed, did really well, and gave the grade. And then the other one, you were pretty solid, and she was never happy with anything. So, if she told you that you were a piece of shit, hey, you're gold. And then she gets to me and she goes, yeah, you know an awful lot about Mickey Mantle, but you passed. So, all that started, and it just goes into, we all started as a fan somehow. And then, and I'm sure we're going to get to the rest of it, but then, you actually make a decision if you want to go into this business. And I did.
Yeah, let's talk about that first step in that decision. It's where you go to college. You do decide to go to college. Tell us why you decided on St. Bonaventure. Look at that. There's the alma mater right there.
I knew you were going to ask me about this, so I wore the hat. And as we record this, they have an NIT game tonight, so I had to put it on.
Perfect. There we go. So why St. Bonaventure, and what types of experience did you get while you were a student there?
Bona is a really special place. I have to first tell you this, and this might come as a surprise to you or anybody who's listening to this, but I hated my freshman year at St. Bonaventure. I was dealing with some things at home. It had nothing, well, it did have a few things to do with the school. I was dealing with some personal stuff at home. My parents, were going through a divorce, and, I was dealing with some stuff at school. I didn't like the curriculum. They were forcing some theology down our throats. I was in a triple in a dorm room, so I was sleeping like this, and if I woke up quick, I'd bang my nose on the freaking springboard because it was a triple. I mean, it was hell, right? So, but I got through, I battled through, and I've never been, I wasn't, brought up to be a quitter. My parents installed, hard work into me from the very get go. And I said, okay, I talked it over with my mom. I talked it over with some other people. I said, I'm going to go back there. And then the rest is history. I had a great time. I chose St. Bonaventure for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to get on the air right away. And I had known about the school, Tom, but I didn't really know about the school from the journalism standpoint. And I'm obviously a little, not as much anymore, but I used to be a musician on a daily basis. I used to be a trombone player. I've picked up guitar a little bit here and there the last 6-7 years, but not enough to be really, really good. But I did everything in music. I was a trombone player in concert bands, the wind ensemble, jazz band, won a state title in the Carrier Dome. I was a big music guy. My mom's a music teacher. She has been for, 40 plus years. And in that wind ensemble, a guy by the name of Shane Lacey, a very dear friend of mine to this day, we were sitting there talking our senior year about, or it might have been late junior, one or the other. And he said, what are you thinking about school? And he was already committed to Bonnie. He was already going there to swim. And he said, you should really look into St. Bonaventure. He goes, I know it's, Ithaca and da-da-da. And I said, well, I'm not going to Ithaca. My sister went there. I'm not going to OCC because I don't want to stay at home. SU, who knows if I can, get in or whatever. And it turns out I didn't get into Newhouse, but I got into the school. And he said, you might want to look into it. Because I met a lot of people who, can get on. There's this campus radio station. So I looked into it a little bit more. And I went to Bonaventure, and sure as what stinks, I went right in. Got right on the sports staff. I was doing sports updates and learning the ropes and being around the Division I teams a little bit until I really started to take a leap with the station, became sports director. Won a semester director of the year, by the way. So you can't take that away from me. But I just kept going, right? You kept grinding, you're learning, you're networking, you're figuring things out. And I did color commentary for the women's basketball team. And then I eventually went over to TV and I tried a stab at that. I interned a ton in Buffalo for Empire Sports. I interned a bunch at home in central New York when I came home on breaks. And Bonaventure was the place for me because I wanted to get on the air right away. I liked the small school aspect. That was a big thing for me. Listen, my first 3 years in college, my farthest class was 388 feet. I walked out of Devereaux Hall, take a right, and boom, Plasman Hall, the journalism building, boom, 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 all the way down the Riley Center, 200 and whatever it was. I counted it one day, 302 feet away, maybe. But you get the point. So, I think that the closeness of it, the fact that it was far enough away, but still close to get back if I had to, and getting on campus radio right from the jump were probably the reasons why I ended up deciding to go there.
Awesome stuff. The St. Bonaventure alumni base is awesome. It's people that spread across the country. I want to go back to that internship you mentioned there because it's so important, especially for students who are listening to this, trying to find that internship. I don't think people, especially in the eastern side of upstate New York, understand the monster that was Empire Sports out in Buffalo. Can you kind of go through that a little bit? Because I think some people don't have the real understanding of that monster you were interning for.
So I got I was watching them obviously before I went to Bona. And then when I went to Bona, obviously it was on all the time, right? Like your dorm room, small dorm room TV, and Empire's on all the time because I'm watching the shows. I want to be Howard Simon and I want to be, all the on-air TV personalities. I want to be Howard Simon, Howard Simon and Howard. There's another Howard that I'm thinking of. I'm blanking on. But anyways, you know what? Josh Mora, Bob Trimble, those were my guys, the on-air TV guys. The other Howard was in production. But, Howard Simon's now been on WGR forever. The TV personalities. And so I was watching this and I was thinking, man, after my sophomore year, I said I'd really, really like to start to, find out if I can get an internship in Buffalo. Because ultimately I want to be in Buffalo. And so or I guess later it was New York or wherever we could get a damn job in this industry. But Buffalo was always a target for me because of my complete and utter devotion, for better or many years worse, to the Bills and the Sabres. So I ended up getting an internship. I called them, I chased them down, and it was unbelievable, guys. I interned there every Friday and every Saturday. I had classes on Fridays, 8:30, 9:30, 10:30, 11:30. I left for Empire, got there by 2:00. I interned all the way until about 9:30, 10. And then I got back to campus about, 11:30 midnight, plenty of terrific winter drives. And of course, luckily didn't hit any drunk students on the way through Allegheny as well, because that was, that was an issue, coming home. And I didn't drink in college. I had tunnel vision. I was right there. I've caught up since, but the reality really is though that Empire was a juggernaut. I mean, they covered the Bills in depth without having the games, but it felt like they did. They were on location all the time. They were the first in Western New York to be the actual sports network of the entire Western New York region. And they carried Sabres games. They were the TV. Today it's MSG. It was Empire then. And here's the other big thing. They covered the college scene. So they would come to my campus. They would cover A10 basketball. So I got to meet the play-by-play guys. I met Jack Armstrong. I'm meeting former players. And it was a big freaking deal. So, no cell phones back then, right? I mean, I think I got a track phone maybe when I was a junior or senior. So I was home phone. I mean, I remember this like it was yesterday. I would run back and I would use my dorm room phone, right? Like a home phone. And I would call my dad and he'd be like, oh yeah, he's like, Bonnie's, what a win, man. I can't wait to come down next week. Cause he watched on Empire. He lived in Central New York. He was watching the Bonnies on Empire. So they did everything really, really great. Ginger Jeffrey's another name that comes to mind. She's now, in school education and administration, but just all of those names brings back a couple of things in the industry: credibility, loyalty, and just top-notch reporting and getting it right. Those were things that Empire did really, really well. And they covered the biggest games, the biggest teams at the biggest moments. And, the fact that they came down to Bona, it was not only fun and it was cool, but especially on a Saturday, if it was a basketball game around 2:00, my car was thanking me because the miles were not going on it that day. So Empire Sports Network was a freaking juggernaut, man. It really was.
It's on the list of things that I wish somebody could make a 30 for 30 of about upstate New York sports. Like that alone is on like the list of things that should just have its own documentary about Empire Sports out there and everything else. So St. Bonaventure, as great as things are going for you and the tide shifts and everything's going well, they do eventually tell you have to leave campus. You graduate. What is that first professional job you land post-graduation at St. Bonaventure, and how'd you end up getting it?
Graduating from college is hell because you get done in May. And let me tell you this. As I was applying for jobs, I was waiting surgery for my ACL and meniscus. My senior year of school at Bona, it was November, just before Thanksgiving. And my buddies and I, we were in the townhouses and we played pickup basketball all the time. And if you could find a night and you got lucky, you'd be able to go play pickup inside the RC. So for us, that was like, I'm playing pickup. I'm looking up at Bob Lanier's, retired number and the Stith brothers and the red seats. What's going to happen the next home game when we, upset somebody and shock the world for the 150th time at the RC. I'm sitting there going, oh my God, this is so great to play here. So this big guy across the way, he was on the other team. I went up for a rebound. He came down, he kind of came across my eye and he really did some damage. And I was like having trouble seeing and blinking and this and that. And I was putting water in there. And I said, man, if I can't go the second trip down the floor, I'm done. Second trip, my buddy Chuck rebounds the ball, does a, kind of Roger Staubach Hail Mary. I catch it, 2 dribbles, layup, tear my ACL. So those were on the same night. So I drove home crippled and blind. But and then I didn't know about the ACL really until March because I was kind of, it blows up, it goes away. And then you're like, oh, okay, maybe this is, and then it hurts a little bit. Then you're hollow and then you almost fall on campus. You're like, something's kind of going on. Then you let it go. Then you go home for Christmas break and you try to sit Indian style, open up your presents and your freaking knee hurts. You feel like you're 100 years old. And so it just kept going. And then the family doctor tells me to take Celebrex. I mean, what is this? What am I, 92? So, all that happened. And then finally I got an MRI and got the results. And I had surgery. I graduated on Mother's Day, of course, which is when a lot of graduations are. And then I was literally waiting out surgery for about 3 weeks. I had it in the first week of June. And during that time, I was hustling. I mean, I was working hard to see who I could meet and how many things I could really send out. The surgery I knew was going to be like a 10, 11, 12-month recovery period. So what happens if I did apply for a job and somebody did take a chance on me? Would I be able to move? What about the rehab? So all that was kind of happening at the same time. But I just grinded to find any kind of open door. And I'm not lying to you. I applied for probably about 800, 900 jobs. And this was back in the day when you couldn't just open up your email, send a link, send a this, send a that, attach your resume, and attach 2 audio files and whatever else, a video or anything. You can do everything electronically today. Back then, you had your cassette tape, you had your mini disc, whatever the hell you had, and you had your resume, you printed everything out, you printed out your reference list, you printed out your cover letter, and you applied for the job off of All Access or wherever that you found it online. I ended up not getting any of the jobs that I applied for. Thank you to the post office, by the way, for all of the envelopes and stamps that you charged me for. My God, I don't even know how much money I spent on applying for jobs. But I will tell you that I did work my way into WHEN 620. It was the sports monster at the time. They carried the Yankees, carried the Crunch. I was a big fan of the station already. I had interned for Adam Shine, and Adam had already taken his job down in WFAN and eventually Mad Dog Radio and all that. And so I ended up getting in there just part-time. I had to produce shows on WSYR radio on Saturdays and Sundays, 5 a.m. in the morning. I had to get there about 4:30, and I worked until 1 p.m. I mean, I worked all the paid shows, and they were brutal for the most part, except for a couple of them. I like Terry's Transmission and my guy Terry, who was the plant guy. I like those shows, but man, other than that, it was tough sledding AM radio on weekends. But why did I do it? Because Jim Lurch said, "I'll give you Fridays to anchor. You can be our sports anchor on Friday, and let's see what you do, and we can grow. And then you can co-host a Perry Noun golf show on Saturday." So I started doing that, and then I grew into my own thing, Pinstripe Passion, on Sundays. And then that eventually led to, I was there for a while, and then when they decided that they weren't going to pay me part-time, and then said that I had to find another sponsor when I didn't really have to, I said, "Oh, I guess I could still kind of do the show." And then they just decided not to carry on with the show. So then I quit. And that was my end game at WHEN. But at that time, just like we were talking about Empire Sports Network, Tom, the sports monster was unbelievable. 620 was a major station. In fact, in 2003, when I was there in the early going, Syracuse, of course, won the national championship that year. And by the way, we're coming up on the 20-year anniversary of that here pretty soon. My dad and I got tickets to go out to Albany because the regional then was in Albany, back when the smaller venues could get regionals. Now you'd never have it in Albany. You might have a first round, second round, but you'd never have a regional final. You never have a regional Sweet 16. So my dad and I went out there, and we had a hell of a time. We went to the Auburn game. I think it was 79-78 was the final. Auburn made a 3 at the buzzer, lost by 1. Syracuse was down in those games in Albany, right? And they came back. I mean, I remember the double-digit game against Oklahoma State. Carmelo said, "Come on up," and took them. But what I'm getting at is that when we drove out to that game, and I couldn't go to the regional final because I had to actually work back at HEN that Saturday, I listened to WHEN with my dad the entire way. We heard it all the way until we parked near the Times Union Center. And so that was when I realized that I was on a station that was pretty darn big. And, with the past people who were there, my guys, Adam Shine, Bob McGilligan, just a host of unbelievable talent that was there. That was kind of how I started. And then I just built, worked a million jobs and just pedaled along, man, and grinded along.
I'm glad you brought up Adam, because I feel like, is it fair to say for you, he might be the biggest influence on your style? You know my story. This is my guy too. This is our guy that we listen to him, his style, how he sets up a show, how he interviews, the monologue, all that stuff. Let's go back a little bit to that internship. And then even though he leaves and you're starting off, was there a competitive side of you? It's like, yo, Adam just left. I know I can do this. Like, put me on every single day. There had to be a moment where you're like, give me the opportunity. I was sitting next to this guy watching him go.
Yeah, it's weird. At that time, I think sometimes if you're 22 and you come out of school, sometimes you think you're better than you really are. I felt like I could be on the air. I felt like I could host shows. But even though Adam was gone, see what happened was Jim Lurch got hired as program director at both SYR and HEN. And then at that time also they had brought in Brent X. And so the shows were already spoken for. I was told maybe some fill-in, which I ended up doing, and I anchored on Fridays. But I was hoping, hey, maybe I can get kind of a weekend gig if the shows are taken, work my way in, show my hard work and my knowledge. Ended up getting connected with Mike Bristol in the high school show on Saturdays as well. So I was just doing a bunch of things at the station for, literally pennies and nickels, of course. And if you worked overtime, by the way, at Clear Channel, you ain't getting that. They found a way around that to break the labor laws on that one. But the reality is, there was no opening. So that's why they threw me on the golf show with Perry. And then eventually the Pinstripe Passion Show was created. Jim and I sat down and basically put that together ourselves. So there wasn't really a spot for me anyway, even though I felt like I could probably do it pretty well. At one point we had a guy by the name of Josh Bertuccini there, who was one of the more talented guys I've ever come across in the business. Him and Axe were butted heads a lot. But they did the Friday Sports Connection where he would go on and go, yo, bro, we're going to have Jim Boeheim on, bro. Jersey kids, totally, hey, dude, bro. One of those guys. And it was weird because he was like that, but he didn't look like it. He kind of looked like I don't even know, like maybe in that fashion, but a West Coast guy. There's a difference between a Jersey guy, yo, bro, and a surfer guy, in California, yes. Yo, bro. But that was kind of it. The shows were kind of spoken for, and I was just kind of humming along, doing my thing and just hoping for a crack. And I was there for quite a while, still hoping for that crack. And I was just working part-time while I was working part-time at the Crunch. And then I ended up managing a band that actually Mike Bristol was in. And then I substitute taught. I was living at home. I mean, I was carrying 5-6 jobs at the same time, trying to land the big time gig. If I had gotten full time at WHEN, of course I would have taken it. But the way the industry has gone, and now especially in 2022, as we've seen this thing, that was 20 years ago, Tom. And the sports monster, when you're in the moment, you're living in it, and you're at places with Adam interning, and then you're on the air. You're just kind of going through it. You're not thinking, well, tomorrow I need full time. Tomorrow I got to be this. Next year this. That. You're working along the way. You're working to get to where you need to go. Did I feel like I deserved a lot more? Probably. I mean, I think a couple years into it, once I proved myself, and you make mistakes on the air, and there's a lot of competition because corporate radio knows that Newhouse is right there and there's a lot of talent, and they just pluck kids for nothing. And hey, come intern for us. We don't have to pay them. So I was having to battle with guys like Anish Shroff. I was having to battle with some of those guys eventually. And Anish took a lot of my hours too, that bastard. But,
you guys are buddies though, which is good.
We are. But, so it's just, and I, he does a great job and I love Anish, but the reality is, HEN at that moment was a big deal, and I was just a part of a team, and I was just feeling really good about, hey, if I grind and I get noticed, it'll happen here. It didn't. I would have taken a full-time job there, but it ended up not happening. And then, they tried to get me into sales and radio on air together because I had sold a little bit part-time, and Rick Yakubush and Patty Bombardo were like, you got to sell for us. You're never going to make any money in sports radio. I'm like, hold on, let's just, I'm only 22. So they gave me a couple offers. Nothing really worked out. And then I just kept humming along. And then once they, told me about Pinstripe Passion, I bailed. I took off.
So hang on a second. So help me through this timeline here, because if you're leaving WHEN, and just timeline wise, we're talking mid 2000s, right?
Yeah, you're looking at that area. Yeah, probably I started there 2002. I did some high school games too at HEN. That was another cool thing. I could do some, we did tape the late high school games. We would call them on Friday nights and then air on Saturday mornings. I started doing those a couple years in, and then more and more people started coming through there. Mike Lissette and Anish Shroff, probably around like 2006.
Okay.
7-ish. Maybe I quit 6, 7, I think. because I also started at a local company full time. I took a full time sales job at a place called CX Tech, and they're still around and they sell network hardware equipment. And I ended up taking a job there in October of 2007. I had just gotten back from Yankees Indians ALDS. That was the bullshit. What were they called? The things across the lake there. Come on,
Jabba Chamberlain's getting eaten up by the pests.
Midges,
yes,
right?
The midges. Yeah, okay. Jabba, that legendary photo. Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Torrey's in the bullpen doing this, and I'm like, buddy, that was his worst managing game of his career. But anyways, I came back from there, took the job with them. I can't remember if I was still at HEN or not at that point. I feel like maybe I was. And then I lost the job at CX Tech the following July. I got laid off because of they had a deal with Cisco where they were trying to do equal to new, where they'd buy refurb in, establish it, and then put a stamp on it that said equal to new and then sell it. And then you'd get a lifetime warranty with it. Well, guess what? That business, they said you couldn't sell those anymore. You can only do our refurb. So I was a part of the cuts because I was also a part of the hire where they ballooned under Bill Pomeroy and all these other guys. And they just kept hiring people. I think I was doing some HEN while I was there at CX Tech. But then if I wasn't, then it was right around that time. If I was, it was soon after that I was done. And then kept going. But I think that I was doing some HEN right up into that. It might have even, Tom, been 2008, 2009 when I eventually took another, as if I didn't learn the first time, but I took another sales job with Win It, and I was doing some stuff on the side as well. And then eventually I got to Citadel and then Cumulus and all that stuff. But the HEN thing was unbelievable. And the talent that came through. I'll tell you one other thing about that time period. Liam McHugh, who's now a superstar, host on TNT, and he did NBC. Obviously, he's covered Olympics, Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, this guy is unbelievable. He's a handsome fellow too, so he's made for TV, unlike you and I. But Liam was a grad student at Syracuse. He had gone to UB for undergrad, and then he was interning for ESPN, the magazine. And actually, I was in the HEN studios, and I came flying out of there for one reason or another. I think I had done an update, and somebody needed something, or I had to get the door for a guest. Something was going on. And I walk out, and there's this young guy who's like super cool and humble, and he comes up and he goes, and I said, "Hey, how are you?" And he goes, "Hi, I'm Liam McHugh." And I said, "Oh, it's nice to meet you." So I met Liam McHugh at HEN when he was looking to do some part-time stuff and intern and all these sorts of things. And now, Liam comes on my shows all the time, but Liam is, he was there too. I mean, you think about the people who went through that building between Adam and Jimmy and Brent and
Graham Bensinger might have been there as well.
Graham Bensinger was there. I had to produce his show. He was kind of a difficult cat for a little while, but a super good guy and really talented. I don't know what was going on. There must have been some money flowing in somehow because he was getting on the air right away with all these shows, maybe a paid show. Who knows if Dad was writing checks? I have no idea. But he would get huge people on his show. I mean, he walked in one day. He goes, "Here's my show called Nick Lachey." And I was like, "Oh," I was like, "You're like 14 years old. And I'm 22 years or whatever I was, 20. Yeah, I think he was there as a student at Syracuse. And I think I was already out of college. So I was a part-time professional working with Graham, who was a student, who's kind of bossing me around a little bit. And, I had to call like Nick Lachey and some of these other guys. So, he was there, but just a lot of the talent, right? Like Liam and Anish and Mike Lissette and all these people who came through there. You know what? It's crazy. It feels like a million years ago, but yet it feels like yesterday. I mean, that's just kind of how things work. Weddings, birth of a kid, one of your favorite jobs. It's crazy how fast time goes. And you get both ends of it, in terms of how long it feels like it's been. But there's a lot of talent that came through HEN, man. There was.
For sure. And that's kind of why I brought up that timeline, because when you leave and then jump to Citadel and then Cumulus, that mid-2000s, basically by 2009, as much as a monster, as much talent there is, it's basically gone by January of 2009 because of layoffs and everything else. So what happens there in Central New York is that Citadel Cumulus station, the Score 1260, and ESPN a little bit later, Galaxy, like they kind of break off into two, but we start seeing more talent go to Citadel and Cumulus, and you enter that spot because of a lot of things you laid out there. But I'm sure, I hope there's still some excitement that you're getting back into it. Like there's an opportunity, there's a new start, maybe some familiar names, but this is a second opportunity for you to be like, okay, maybe it didn't work out at WHN, but at WSKO, the Score 1260 and everything else, this is a fresh start for me and maybe something different's on the way.
Yeah, I got a weekend job. Well, I got a full-time job. I was full-time there, but the catch was they wanted me to come in and be a sales guy. So I had to be a sales rep and then be an on-air person as well. So I hosted on the weekend. And then eventually things started, Danny Parkins was there with Brent Axe. So it was like Danny had the midday and then Brent had the afternoons. And then I was on the weekends, and then Danny left, and then I slid into midday in front of Brent. And then when Brent left, I then slid into the drive home. It was an opportunity for me to have my own show, to do a lot of stuff during the week. It kind of really did work out in the beginning because the sales part of it was really my main focus and my main job. And then on the weekend, it was the on-air part. Go to the SU game, talk about it the next day, whatever the case may be. Eventually when it became Cumulus, those jobs really intertwined with each other. So I would be spending 10 minutes on sales, and the next thing you know, I get an email about somebody, hey, I can come on at 2:30, or I can tape an interview at 2:30. Now I'm emailing back a guest. Then my phone rings, and it's, the business department asking me a question about it, some, past bill, and I don't want to lose commission. So I got these three things going on. I hang up here, I send the email there, and then I do this, that, and the other thing, go on the air. During, commercials, I'm typing emails and sales. Then I go to the Carrier Dome, cover the game, come back, do post game. So it eventually got into that. But in the beginning, when Dan Austin hired me, that was a great staff at Citadel. That was the best sales team I've ever worked with. I mean, Kevin Rich and Nicole Wafer and John Hunt and Mark Owens, and all these people, and Angela Moonen, who's a dear friend of mine to this day, who's just crushing it right now, running an ad agency, and she splits time between New York and Florida. Just a tremendous human being, my favorite sales boss that I've ever had in radio. And Dan was GM there. He hired me, and then a week after, he got a job in San Diego. I'm like, buddy, he just hired me, and then he leaves. What the hell are you doing? But that was a good group. That was a fun sales team to work on. And I did okay in the beginning. I mean, I sold. I made my buck off of what was called the clubhouse card. I started that and formulated that. I ended up doing high school games as well. So that was a nice thing to get going. We could sell that. And it just kind of, from there, I just kind of, again, it's funny because if you look at the HEN model and you look at the score model for me as an employee, they're pretty similar. The only difference is the sales aspect at Cumulus and Citadel prior to that was way, 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 way more enhanced. I mean, the Monday, Wednesday meetings, Friday one-on-ones, this and that and the other thing. You have to go to a promo meeting. You have to do this. You have to do that. I didn't have to do any of that at HEN. I was selling part-time, but I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. And maybe later I didn't know what I was doing as well. But the reality is, they both kind of take on the same storyline, right? I mean, getting this gig and grinding and picking things up, and then something evolves in the building, then you get moved into the next spot, right? Like HEN went from just the anchor to golf show co-host with anchoring to Pinstripe Passion. And then, I get hired at Citadel, and it's sales during the week, and then it's a weekend show, and then it's high school games and the weekend show, and then it's getting credentialed places, and then it's middays, and then it's drive home, and then it's more sales, so they kind of mirror each other in a very strange way.
Yeah, it's almost, I think you almost underrated and humbly talked about that ascension basically to the afternoon drive, because look, you grinded. It felt like an athlete when you're telling that story, right? You come in as a freshman, you got to learn the offense, then you might redshirt, then you might play special teams, then you
first
might
guy in the room, last one to leave.
Exactly. But that moment for you, look,
yeah,
the midday stuff aside, because the midday is an awesome opportunity, but to go to afternoon drive in your hometown market for something that you wanted to do, that you had gone to school for, and there you are now hosting. Wasn't there a moment you're like, you know what? I put in all this grind. I know I'm still selling. I know I'm full time, but this is what I've been grinding at. And here's my moment. I'm hosting afternoon drive in my home market.
It was rewarding, I think, in the beginning to get the afternoon drive slot, because at that point you're kind of more along the lines of a face of a radio station, right? And you're as because you and I were working together for a while, I really pride myself on meeting my listeners, going out, and when I'm doing, post games and formulating friendships and understanding and the pulse of the market and the fan base and all that stuff's really, really important to me. And so I felt like I could do more of that as an afternoon drive host. I feel like I could be more of the personality. By the same token, I was a little disappointed because I was hoping that, hey, these guys are gone now and I'm here. Can I just be a full-time on-air guy? Like, do you guys not recognize my talent? I don't know how, at that time, I don't know how talented I was, but I felt like I was good enough to be an everyday host and really commit to it to the point where I could deliver, content and organization and develop a staff and go to games all the time, right? Be in the public limelight, go cover all the basketball, all the football, all the lacrosse, go to 20, 30 baseball games a year, be there, be in all the press boxes, get network, get cards, network the hell out of it, get the best guests in Central New York. And frankly, no matter where you are, you should strive to get the best guests, because it's content driven, it's credibility driven. And so while I was pumped on the one side, I was also disappointed because I was like, man, I got to keep selling here and do this drive home show. I'm like the only guy who's doing this right now, guy or girl in the building. Like, Ted and Amy weren't doing that. Dave Racina wasn't doing that. And I was looking around, I'm like, wow, this, like, I have to keep selling right now. And so in the beginning, it actually benefited me a little bit because I could go and talk about my show more, the middays to afternoon. Now, all of a sudden you're in a wheelhouse, despite the listenership only being, 4,500 to 5,500, a week. It was nowhere near, the 110,000 a week for 93Q or the 50 to 60,000 Q on 95X, or eventually the Rebel, which was, between 15 and 25 between the on air and then the online. But it helped me to be able to, as a salesperson, I could go out and pitch my show in a wheelhouse spot, right? In a drive home spot, which is one of the biggest places that people want to be as far as advertisers. You want to be an AM drive. You want to be when people are going to work and coming back from work. Not that everybody's on the 9 to 5 schedule, but you get the point. So, that was a hotbed time to advertise for people on the Score and elsewhere. And so I felt a little bit of both sides of the coin, though, Tom. I really did.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think some people might look at that and wonder, okay, that might be why the transition happens so fast for you, because you take that spot in January of 2014, and by April of 2014, you're off to 104.5, the team in Albany. Mm-hmm. Take us through the story of how you ended up 2 hours east at the ESPN affiliate.
Well, I got wind through the radio stations that the contracts were going to be up for Bruce Jacobs and Brian Noe. And Kevin Rich, a very good friend of mine, was at the stations, and he told the program director, Stephen Giattari, about me. And he, said, hey, if you're looking for more of a Yankees presence, you might want to look at my buddy in Syracuse. We work together, blah, blah, blah. So again, all you people out there listening, looking for jobs and you're young and all this stuff, it is who as much as it is what right? And whatever the relationship might be, good, bad, whatever in between, it is who And so I was recommended, and I went there on a couple of interviews, and then I went to cover the Big East tournament in 2000. It was actually 2013 when I was hired in Albany. And 2013 Big East tournament, that was the last Big East tournament for Syracuse, by the way. Epic win over Georgetown, and then they lost in the final to Louisville. They just ran out of gas. But I was covering the entire tournament behind the backboard. And I went back to my hotel, which I had to trade out, by the way, of course, to stay in New York. I had to trade it and sell it and the whole thing, even to just go. And, I got a call from Steve. And he said, hey, how you doing? How's New York? I said, good, good. So we talked a little bit, and he said, so how do you think, the interviews went? And I was like, good, very, very, very well. And I said, it, obviously be huge to join the team. And he said, well, he goes, if you want to join the team, he goes, that's why I'm calling. He goes, I'm here to offer you a job. We want to put you into middays. We want to have you do a weekly Yankee show. We want to have you grow with our sales team and, go out and do live events, live shows on location, and all that. So I said, He goes, you can take, I had already said yes in my mind, but then he, he was like, take a night to think about it. And I'm like, I don't need any time to think about this, but okay. And so I called him back the next day, and that was it. And I got hired, and I started on April 1st. Maybe that was the problem, that I started April 1st, huh? But, and then, got into the capital region and was some of the best times of my life. It was a special, special summer. It really was.
There's something about that April 1st date. I think we're now up to 5 different shows in the history of 104.5. The team have started on April 1st, whether that's a strange sign or not. I heard that date go off in my head. I'm like, there's something weird about April 1st and 104.5, the team. But all right, I'm sure you may or may not want to talk about this. I'm sure you're fatigued at this point. So if you want to say, guys, I've talked enough about this, you can say enough. Do we want to talk about the end of it? You tell me.
Yeah. So, and by the way, there is a reason for that with April 1st, because when you look at corporate budgets, a lot of radio budgets hiring is based on how much money you've made in the first quarter. So that's a little secret for everybody.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. That's right.
You're welcome. That's why I'm here. Yeah, the end was tough. Probably looking back on it was arguably the worst day of my life. I put that right up along with losing a family member. It hurt that bad. I was a mess. I cried for days. It was brutal. For those who don't know, and I won't spend tons of time on it, I'll try to condense it down into 2 or 3 minutes, which for me is pretty good. I was starting to really make way with the baseball alumni group to get former players on, guests on. And because I was hosting a Yankee show, I was obviously going after the obvious names, right? I was going after Tommy John and Chris Chambliss and others. And so I got a hold of the woman because Tommy John had come to Albany to promote his wine. And she said, sure. She goes, just email me who you would be interested in, and then I'll forward it over to them, and I'll put a good word in for you. And if they're interested, they'll contact you. I said, beautiful. So I got an email from Shane Spencer. I was at Oak Hill covering the PGA Championship, and I got an email from him on Friday. And he said, hey, I can come on your show Monday, blah, 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 1 o'clock, whatever time it was. I said, okay. And so it was 1:30, I remember. So the spot was booked. I followed up with him. I said, sure, no problem. And my producer called. Now, fast forward to Monday. My producer calls Shane Spencer. Now, the studio was you stand here, and then the producer thing is on the other side, but you can see the person through the window. The door's shut, obviously. So he calls him, can't get a hold of him, and he comes back out, and he says, hey, I couldn't get Shane, but I left a message, and I told him to call our listener line. And I was like, why did you do that? We have a studio line. That's oh yeah, well, I put that in there too. So then I didn't know like what number he gave, whatever. I'm like, all right. So then I got a text message from the clubhouse guy for the Somerset Patriots who said, hey, I'm with Shane right now. He can't come on your show because we have a double header. Okay, Shane Spencer didn't know that on Friday when he emailed me that he had a double header. I mean, you do a 1:30 interview, but yeah. So anyway, whatever. That's the business. I said, no problem. We'll get him next time, blah, blah, blah. So we're coming up against the break. And I simply said something like, I can't get Shane Spencer on today. He's got a doubleheader game. Just was in touch with his clubhouse guy. Coming up next, we'll talk some Giants football. It's midday with Mike Lindsley here on the 104.5, the Team ESPN radio. Next thing you know, the phone rings. And I pick it up. I don't know what my producer was doing, but I picked it up. And the person on the other line said, hey, Mike. And it was windy, right? And there was some noise in the background. Hey, Mike, I can do the interview. It's Shane Spencer. And I said, oh, I just texted your clubhouse guy, Gary, and he said that you couldn't come on because of doubleheader. No, I'm good. What am I supposed to do at that point? That's the listener line. That's what was given out wrongly. Do I take the call? Do I not take the call? It's not like his voice resonates like, I don't know his voice like Jim Boeheim's, I don't know his voice like Derek Jeter. I don't know his voice like whoever, Jim Kelly. So I took the call. I did the interview and it wasn't him. And so we had people calling from all over the place. New York, I was ripped on the Yes Network, not named, but I was ripped on the Yes Network by Ken Singleton. the New York Times, the LA Times, Brent Axe from Syracuse was trying to call and write a story about me. And I wasn't allowed to talk about it at all. There was an investigation behind the scenes. So I thought they didn't really follow through with that. There were a lot of lies thrown around. I was told as this was going on that, hey, don't worry about it. These things happen. It's radio. There's hoaxes. We're still committed to make you the drive home, by the way, host. I had already been promoted verbally to that gig after Labor Day. The first show was going to be that Tuesday after Labor Day, the last weekend at the track, right? It was like a huge start of the NFL, playoff baseball coming up. I mean, what a great time to be the drive home guy in the freaking capital region with everything centering around the area. And so time went on. A couple weeks later, I just didn't have a really good vibe. I just didn't feel good about it. I didn't see our general manager much. I didn't really have conversations like I used to with the program director. People were distant to me. The sales team was normal. And then all of a sudden I got pulled into Steve Drew Terry, the same guy who hired me, SG, we called him. And he sat me down. He said, "This isn't working out. We're letting you go." And I said, "What do you mean it's not working out? What isn't working out?" And I'm like, "What did I do? Did I do something wrong? Was there a live event that I was talking at that somebody didn't like how I promoted them? What do you mean it's not working out?" And they wouldn't give me any answers. Just, it's not working out. And then I started in with, "Oh, it's the Shane Spencer thing," right? Because what happened, Tom, and this is the final thing I'll tell you, is that after I did the interview, Spencer called me irate because Derek Jeter called him. Because that interview was played in the clubhouse at Yankee Stadium because I had brought up steroids. And then he started coming in and was like, "Oh, Rivera and Jeter," he started like throwing people under the bus. And Jeter called him and said, "That's BS." And Shane goes, "That wasn't me, blah, blah, blah." So Spencer called me direct. He was irate with me. He wanted me to, he was like, "I'm going to come after you." Da, 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 da. And I said, I go, "Buddy, I would be the last person to disparage the Yankees. You have no idea how much I love the Yankees. And I want to do right by this." So we ended up getting them on. There was a rain delay against the Angels that night, and it worked out perfectly. We ended up doing the interview inside that. We ended up the next day in Saratoga at the track live where we said, hoaxes have no place in radio, blah, 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 blah. We moved on. I thought for a while that everybody had moved on. That wasn't the case. And then I was just told that it wasn't gonna work out. And they put the producer and I and made us a little tag team, like it was our tag team, error, and we both got canned on the same day.
Well, thank you for being candid about that, because
August
I know
30th.
August
30th.
I know it's not stuff you want to go back and remember and everything else, but I think for somebody who might have never heard that story before or might go through that same thing in their career, hopefully they'll benefit from hearing from that story. And just to add to this from the radio side of it, and I know you know this from your career, you could make a laundry list of things that are far worse in this business than what you did that people have not been let go for. Like, we could do a series of where this stacks up. The most disappointing part about this, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is that when people initially had your back and when something goes wrong or they don't have your back, it just feels awful because like they said, you're our guy. And then the one thing, something goes poorly, they don't have your back anymore. That's what hurts me, where it's like, people are going to make mistakes. Like, look, you get it. You own it. You're a professional. But the fact that one controversy happened and they didn't have your back, my God, you and I could go through the list of things that people have done that corporations and companies have had their on-air host back for. But
well, and not only that, but as time was going on and I was told I was going to be the afternoon drive host and all that, they leaned on me to hire the brand manager. I mean, they said, "We're not going to bring in a brand manager unless you approve it because you're our drive home guy. You guys are going to have to work together." And I'm like, "Okay, that's great." Right. And he didn't have any answers for me, on the day that I lost my job. I'm sitting there, tears are pouring down my face. I'm in the parking lot. I can't even take my stuff home. They won't even let me pack up stuff in my boxes and take it home. I had to go back and get it. And my girlfriend at the time drove me because I was a mess. I was struggling so bad. And that girlfriend is not my wife. I in the parking lot, I couldn't get answers from anybody. And I would have just loved to have been able to sit down with somebody and they told me the story. They told me exactly, "Hey, we had your back with corporate. We had your back with corporate. They just can't get past this. They want to fire you. It's not our deal." Or so-and-so's trying to sue or what, or you know what? This would have been a very fair result. "You know what, Mike, we're going to put you on a 1-month leave of absence until we get this all squared away. We still want you to be the guy. We still want you to be the drive home guy. But we got a couple people in corporate we're trying to work through. Keep your phone on because you might have to talk, and then we'll go from there. But you know what? I found the guy who did it, at least by first name. I don't know by last name, but I ended up getting the phone number, and I called. I was told after the fact, don't do that. But I had gotten the number, and he picked up, and it was the exact voice. And I was like, you son of a bitch, because you just cost me. And by that point, oh, what do you mean? Oh, and he was playing the cool card, but he was the prankster. He was Shane Spencer, complete and utter joke of a human being to do that to somebody. And, I gave that number, and I gave information as much as I could to a couple people in house who had connections to investigative reporters. And I was told that they were going to find out exactly who this person was and get to the bottom of it, and we can all move on. But this is not your fault. This is not your fault. That's what I was told for a couple of weeks, and then I got canned. So that part also needs to be said, that they were building the radio station with me as the drive home future host and leaning on me for decision making for who to bring in the hiring process. And then they fired me.
And then to add to that, even though you go through this controversy, even though you go through this incident, not only are you able to come back to Syracuse and host again, but from that, you do host national shows. Like when I first met you, you're hosting on Yahoo, SB Nation. Like, even though that's a huge roadblock in your career, you are still getting calls from people nationally in between that period of when you go back officially to the Score 1260 and that end where you're still filling in nationally, which speaks to your talent, I think. And I hope those calls and those opportunities are like, you know what? That's awful. That's something that's going to follow me forever. But I know I can still do this. Like, I know if I get an opportunity, I can still make this a profession.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. In fact, as I was, when I just lost my job in Albany and I was in my apartment, I was just, every day. I went from, every day at 3:00 was the hardest time of the day because I knew that I was supposed to be on the air. Instead, I'm sitting at home in my apartment, pounding out emails and calls, trying to freaking find a job. And lo and behold, I emailed my boy, Go Bonas, Adrian Wojnarowski, and Woj emailed me back with a Woj bomb. And he told me that Craig Larson, the PD at Yahoo, has been looking at some different guys and talent, this and that, and you can do it maybe remote. What are your plans, this and that? And I found out that back at the home stand there, back in the stomping grounds at the Score and Cumulus, they still have an ISDN line. God, oh, I love ISDN lines, man. Can we please just go to those all the time? But, great connections. How many times have you used them? I've used them, live broadcast, doing games, you name it. And I thought to myself, well, if I could use the ISDN line and I could host nationally, I don't really want to come back to Syracuse. I'm kind of done with that company at this point. I think I reached kind of the ceiling. But I got the national thing. So maybe I can do the national thing, and then keep hustling and then get recognized again and then move out of the area again. So that's what I did. So I moved back, and then I hosted for a while, on Cumulus, and then Yahoo ended up becoming SB Nation. And then they kept me there for a little while, and then, removed me for programming, different shifting of programming. And then eventually they gave me a show back on Saturdays, and then they pulled that after a couple of shows because they were opening it up to sell it. So the finances, again, back to this business, the finances come first. If you're not making enough money, you just get rid of it. That's what people do. So I did those national shows. I got a chance to fill in for Steve Saban, in the mornings on Yahoo. Was one of my favorite talk show hosts I've ever listened to. And so, yeah, it was pretty cool, doing those. I wish it would have lasted longer, to be honest with you.
So you get this opportunity. You're back in the afternoon drive. The Score 1260 starting to add. They added me in the mornings. They had middays. Like, it's a little bit more stable, I guess I'll say. But we're in this weird spot in the history of, I think, sports talk radio and podcasts where we are starting to see podcasts emerge a little bit. Unfortunately, some of the obstacles that you faced earlier in your tenure at the Score and Cumulus are still there when you come back. When you decided to eventually leave the Score for the second time, was it a mix of that just the world was changing, that sports radio was changing, that take us kind of through that second time where you step away and it feels like there's different variables than time number one?
Yeah, there were a little bit. I probably would have never have left if it wasn't for just the constant, it's never good enough. Everything you do is never good enough. And there were certain people in that building who made life very difficult for me. I didn't have an opportunity to use my cell phone during the day because I was, in the basement. There was no reception, and other things were going on in the building that I was just, the challenges were so large. And I'm trying to sell. I'm trying to be the on air guy. I have to go to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like Friday meetings. I got to book my own guests. I'm trying to run my own staff. I've got meetings on the programming side with my PD. All of those things are going on. I have my station budgets. We have online budgets to hit. I mean, I'm trying to sell Syracuse post games. I'm trying to sell high school sports. I'm the color commentator for high school sports. I'm hosting both post games for football, basketball. Plus, I'm doing the afternoon drive 3 to 6. I mean, I was working the last week of August until the first week of April, especially if SU was making it, it to the Final Four. I was working 75 to 80-hour weeks, 7 days a week from the last week of August to the first week of April, because there was no other way to do it. I mean, there's no other way to get all the time in. Plus, as you know, if you get back from the Carrier Dome and you do your post-game show, after you get done with your post-game show, Twitter is now available. Twitter is now alive. Social media is alive. And guess what? It never ends. The notifications keep coming. Even if you have to deal with a troll here and there, you respond because of credibility. You retweet. You're getting into this. You're getting into that. So it was very, very, very different from the first time, because the first time I got offered a job. That was it. I got offered a better job in a better market just as an on-air guy. Didn't have to sell. The next time around, I go back, but I still basically had the same exact job that I left, being both on air and the sales thing. And, a lot of people, there were a lot of changing parts, from the uppers, the upper management, and certain things weren't seen eye to eye, and I had just had enough. I had a final conversation with my wife about, are we staying in Central New York? Because, I want to move. What are we doing here? And, it was decided that we were going to stay. And I then said, okay, well, I'm quitting my job. She said, what? I said, yeah. I said, I can't do it anymore. It's not working for me. Every single day is, I mean, I used to drive to work at the end like this, just dreading to go in, because I couldn't. Every single day was a brick wall ahead of me, and I still loved going on the air. I still loved the excitement of the post games. I loved all that stuff, but it was just, I never was told, for the most part, that what I was doing was enough. We really value you here. And if it was told, the person really didn't mean it. You mean this to us as an on-air guy. You're a hustler in sales. Even when you have a bad quarter, we still know that you're hustling and trying to do your thing. That's all you want to hear as an employee. When you're a quarterback and you throw 3 interceptions, you don't get fired. You get an opportunity to go back the next week and try to redeem yourself. And, I just didn't want to put up with that lifestyle anymore. And just get ridiculed on a daily basis. So I took off. But, I cried the last day. I cried when I did my last show. I remembered, I wanted to follow through the football season, and I did. I'm very proud of that I did follow through and do all the shows and honor the clients and the mentions and the live reads and all that. And it was SUBC on a Saturday. I went to the game. I did a post game. I signed off, and then I tweeted that I was gone. And then I went to the movies at night, and I shut my phone off for about 4 hours and then turned it back on. And obviously it almost broke. But it was a sad day for me, but I was prepared to make the transition.
When that happened, I was both encouraged and discouraged by you. Encouraged because in comparison to other people who've grown up in radio and made that their profession, you knew what you were doing when it came to building a website, building a brand, doing social media. There are so many people you've worked with and I've worked with who are so deeply into radio that they don't touch any of that stuff and understand the value. You are, I would still say, in the minority at that point of, hey, I know there's a bunch of other audience over here that when I eventually step away, I'm going to be okay. But also discouraged, and it kind of leads to this question of, what do you see as the future of upstate New York sports talk radio, whether it's Syracuse, Albany, Rochester, Buffalo, those markets? Are you more discouraged than ever before? Or do you see the podcast to be like, that's just a change? What are your feelings now, years removed from this?
Yeah, I don't think that the future is bright for it. I mean, if you think about Central New York radio right now, you have barely anything on the former station. You have another sports station that's a Fox affiliate that's a part of a radio group that just runs syndication all day long. It's good syndication, but who's the live voice? How come you're not going to do something? You need Yankees, Red Sox in markets. You need Carolina, Duke. You need Auburn, Alabama, Army, Navy. You need that. And Syracuse doesn't have that anymore. The ESPN radio station has basically been the same. It's the same people all the time. They have the benefit, obviously, of Syracuse sports and covering that. And so a lot of the hosts, it's contractually built in that Jerry McNamara has to go on every week, and Red Autry has to go on, and Jim Boeheim, and everybody has to go on every single week. They don't have to work for those interviews. They come to them because the coaches are getting paid to do those interviews. And they're the main show in town right now because they have the most programming and they carry Syracuse sports. But who's challenging them? Who's the host that is going to go in as a drive home guy and basically completely and utterly destroy the 2-3 zone against Louisville if it's needed? Who's going to go up against Brent's take, or who's going to go up against the Orange Nation take? It's just become stale. It's become a one-trick pony here. It's a one show situation, and it's very unfortunate because I look at this market and I look at it as a place that is a great launching pad for people. I've worked with unbelievable talents in this business in my time. But now it's like relegated to one main station, another one that's kind of doing some things that might be given the impression that they're really trying, but they're not. Because if you're really trying, you would have had, you'd have 2 shows on back to back at least. I mean, you'd have, an afternoon drive guy, and you'd have, Jim and his group doing his show. You might even have a morning show, but there's not a commitment to sports radio. There's not an understanding to it. And unfortunately, with the group that I was with and elsewhere, there is a misunderstanding of how to operate sports radio. What does it take for this to be successful? And it's just really lacking. And as that lacks, you don't have a lot of programming. You don't have Carolina, Duke. You don't have Georgetown, Syracuse. So it's sad. I don't know if I'm encouraged much. I'd love to get back on the air somewhere, somehow in the area. I don't know where that would be, but I would love that for the future at some point if it would fit my schedule. That would probably be, I always hold out a small sliver of hope and encouragement in that regard. But other than that, I'm not encouraged. I would be probably more, I think the word is sad. I mean, I think I'm more sad about, what's happened to radio, in Central New York than I am encouraged or discouraged.
No, and I feel that same way. Both Central New York, out here in Albany, what you just said too, like it's just become, I'm sure Rochester, Buffalo's a little different, although Buffalo is owned, WGR is the flagship for the Sabres and the Bills. I think a lot of listeners are going to hear what you just said when it talked about one-sided opinions owned by the teams. And this is no different. You go back to Washington, D.C., Daniel Snyder owned a station, and we can run through the media people. The guy who owned Stan Kroenke owned some stations out in Denver. Like, there are big time people who own stuff like that. And I hope that's where the podcast and the non-traditional media steps in, where it's what you just mentioned of when I turn on the radio, the team's never lost a game. The opinions are so one-sided. Hopefully the audience understands, okay, this isn't real. I'm going to go somewhere else to go find it, what I really think is happening in the games and everything else. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm unfortunately discouraged. If I was a kid who was 22 right now, leaving St. Bonaventure or Hobart or Syracuse, I'd try to start my own thing, hope it takes off, maybe find a way to sell and everything like that. I want to get to that advice, but first, tips for a great interview. This is one of my favorite tweets you've ever got when I used to produce your show. Jeff Pearlman, Showtime with the Lakers author, used to tweet you, Mike Lindsley, and compliment you every time, I think in my mind every time, of how great an interviewer you are. You've interviewed thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands. Young student, tips for a great interview.
I would say, first of all, know your subject. That's the first thing. If you're getting, a former big leaguer on, know the career, know where they've been, dip into the research pool. The second piece of advice is ask relatively short questions depending on what your format is and let them talk. And then here's the third one. And this one's going to stun you. And it's going to stun everybody. Do not have questions written out. And I haven't done an interview with questions written out in probably 20 years. And the reason that I don't do that is because I'm already writing the questions out during the week. I'm already preparing with watching games, reading online articles, on my phone apps reading, contacting people, following different things, watching and listening to post-game shows, downloading and subscribing and listening to, 25 to 30 podcasts a week. That's all preparation. So that if I get somebody like an Anthony Castrovince, who I'm going to have on in about 15 minutes after I get done with you, if I have him on for Major League Baseball, I know right away I'm going Yankees offseason, Trevor Story to Boston, Freddie Freeman's a Dodger, Matt Olson's a Brave. The lockout's over with. Baseball's starting soon. Are we in trouble with the analytics still? I'm going right into that. I got 8 right here. I got 8 or 9. And then you know what happens? Here's the last piece of advice for a great interview. Be a good listener. Because if you don't have the question sheet out, but you've got it up here, it becomes more of a conversation. And as you ask good questions within a good conversation, what happens? They talk more, and it creates more questions for you to ask.
I'm so glad you offered those last two. I learned that one about not writing down questions from you. And I remember coming out to 104.5, the team, and might have been Levac. He said, "Where are the questions?" I said, "Questions for what?" He goes, "The interview." And then my eyes bugged out. I'm like, "What are you doing? What do you mean you're writing stuff down?" And I learned that from you. And it's a great piece of advice. Seriously. And that last part of listening, all that good stuff, man. I will let you go. I know you're busy. You got an interview coming up here with Anthony coming up, but best advice for maybe a young St.Bonaventure student, upstate New York student, to go to the spot, to get there where Mike Lindsley, he's done it all. He's talked to everybody. He's in the non-traditional media format now. Best advice for young students, aspiring broadcasters.
I would say in no particular order, grind, right? Work your tail off. Number 2, say no to nothing. Somebody wants you to go part-time and they're going to pay you $40 for 6 hours of work and you're 22 years old, but you're going to get great experience. Go do it, right? Network the heck out of yourself. Hand out business cards, talk to people, shake hands, send follow-up emails constantly, thank people constantly. You're going to run into a lot of brick walls. Bridges will be burned by either you or the other side. I've burned bridges. I have. I'll admit it. Sometimes I didn't burn a bridge though, because there wasn't a bridge to that was there in the first place. But that's a big one. Network. I would say grind, network, say no to nothing. And I would also say, you had mentioned if you're a 22-year-old, right? And how terrified you would be going into the business. I actually maybe would be excited now about the business. And here's why. Because I think a 22-year-old Mike Lindsley, and I just talked to a journalism class about this at Bonaventure, I think I'd still decide to go to school. I think I'd still decide to go to journalism. But with this modern media, I would blend the two together. When I'm a high school sophomore, folks, don't wait until you're in college. If you're 17 years old and you know that you want to be a play-by-play broadcaster, start your podcast now. Your YouTube, your Twitter, Facebook. You know what? You're going to go out there. You're going to have a lot of reps. You're going to sound like shit. Everybody does. I sounded like shit. I probably still sound like shit. But the reality is, do it. Okay? And the last piece of advice that I would tell these young broadcasters is, while you're doing it, do it all the time. Reps. The more you talk, the better you get. And another thing is too, read. Articles, books, biographies, watch specials on television, all of that stuff. You take it in and you're a sponge with all of that information. And then you also can write, probably, right? So if you write well, the more you write, the better you talk. The more you talk, the better you read. The more you read, the better you talk. They're all linked in here. So I would say those would be the big things. Grind, network, say no to nothing. Blend the media together, and for sure, commit to reading and commit to the craft. Those would be the things I'd tell people.
Thank you for doing this, my friend. This has been awesome. Truly one of my favorite interviews. Even though I've worked with you, I didn't know some of these stories. All your stuff, Mike L Sports, social media, check it out. We're going to tag it right here in our description, both visual and audio side. I feel like I just went to class. I want Mike Lindsley not to continue to just do his podcast. He's crushing it online, Pinstripe Passion, and more. I've told you, this podcast is about teaching people and getting people. I want you as a professor at Bonaventure somewhere else. I would sit in a class and listen to Mike Lindsley teach and tell stories all day long about the people that you've worked with, the people you've interviewed. So maybe, who knows? Maybe in the future, I'll be sitting in one of the backyard classes and listening to your podcast at the same time.
Yeah. Well, right now I would definitely be a part-time professor, but they'd have to allow me to bring my daughter in so I could change her diapers all the time. But, the reality is, and she's such a great kid. I've enjoyed being a father so much. But, I'm a son of two teachers, and I substitute taught for a while. And I threw around the idea of maybe I'll go to grad school and just teach at this point, because the frustration was really settling in with, not getting a journalism job. And, so teaching is kind of been over here a little bit. So, I'd be open to it for sure. I've contacted Bonas, and the dean knows. I finally met the dean there, Aaron Schimble, who's just killing it, doing an unbelievable job. I told him, hey, if there's anything that I can do that's, part-time, I can be remote, maybe go to campus once in a blue. Let me know. I'd love to be able to help, because, hey, listen, I'm helping students right now. I mean, I've got people contacting me left and right. I'm working on a couple internships for a couple students right now. All that's on my free time. So, if you're a Bonnie, you're a Bonnie for life, and you network with those people forever. And, it's been an interesting ride, Tom, and a fun ride. And I appreciate you having me on. And I wish you well in this new world as well.
Even though I'm not a Bonnie, I consider myself one of your students, learning from you, my friend. Keep crushing it. So happy to have you, and looking forward to talking again soon. And maybe some beers at Saratoga this summer, finally, hopefully.
Boy, I tell you what, Saratoga is one of the greatest places on earth. And I never, ever want to turn. I just got to get permission to go. But okay. I never, ever would turn down a trip to Saratoga. That place is absolutely spectacular.
All right. Goodbye, my friend. Talk again soon.
Thanks, Tom.